few things to glean from the Super Bowl, not just that the Rams won and the Bengals lost, but how this game played out, I think pokes into the future that the Steelers are trying to build for themselves in this era after Ben Roethlisberger, namely about how they need to proceed at offensive line and quarterback. Joining me to talk about that today is Wes Euler of Steeler Nation Radio. It's going to be a fun one here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Odyssey, as well as YouTube. Hit the like button if you're watching this video on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our daily content. We thank you for making us your first podcast listen every day. Joining me, our recurring guest, our friend, our buddy from Steeler Nation Radio, also from the Ears and Beers podcast. You hear him all the time. Wesley Euler is in the house. What's up, Wes?
Bing bong. What's up, partner? How we doing?
Bing bong, he says. I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Wes, I wanted to talk to you about the Super Bowl. I didn't spend too much time, thinking about it in the Monday episode, but I wanted to talk to you about it more in the Tuesday episode.
Sure.
Particularly because I knew I'd have a guest, and I thought it would be great to talk with you. And we talked a little bit on your Monday segment with Arthur Moats on Steeler Nation Radio about the Super Bowl, but it seemed to me one of the biggest things that I took away from it was Joe Burrow, for all the things that he did in this year to help bring the Bengals up, for all the tough moments that he had when he stood in there. It really seemed like, even though he had three really talented receivers, a really talented running back, a good tight end, he was very limited because of his lack of a consistent offensive line and the pressure that everyone knew the Rams were out to bring. To me, this could be a glimpse into when people are saying the Steelers need to just go after quarterback, get their heir to Ben Roethlisberger right now and forget about the offensive line, worry about that later. I think that the Bengals, the way that they lost that game and the way they almost lost several of their playoff games this year is a sign that maybe that's not the best road to take at this point. But am I overanalyzing that?
Well, like we all know, the NFL, like every other sport, but I think they're at the top of this list. Copycat league, right? Like we say that about pretty much every professional sports league, but especially the NFL, because it is such an evolving game. Like basketball has evolved,
right?
But it's still 5-on-5. If you've got the two best players on the court, you can still do a lot more than your opposition. Football, it's changed. It changes so much. Chris, football's changed a ton just from when the Steelers won the Super Bowl in 2009, and I mean that wasn't that long ago. It's I think a nice kind of, I don't know if warning sign is the right way to put it, but it's certainly, I think, something that the Steelers should have their eyes on and should consider, is that if you look around the scope of the league, maybe the last 5 years or so, teams that have ready-made offensive lines for their young quarterbacks, those young quarterbacks can come in and have a lot of success. The Joe Burrows who do it against that are much more rare. And eventually it feels like it catches up with you. Like, the Packers, the Cowboys were really good Dak Prescott's first year because they had that offensive line. You get the quarterback, you get it moving. Russell Wilson had that same type of thing. Patrick Mahomes had a pretty good offensive line. Credit to Joe Burrow for what he was able to do in the face of a lot of this pressure. I mean, everyone remembers the Titans game. He was sacked 9 times.
9 times?
9 times? Nice Ferris Bueller reference there. He was still able to win that game, but you also know there's a reason that last season he got hurt and tore his ACL. There's a reason why he was banged up in that Super Bowl and had a nasty little collision with his other knee. When you've got a guy like Joe Burrow, you can't afford to take those risks. If you're the Steelers and you're trying to find your next franchise quarterback, you can't afford to take those risks. So we know it's a copycat league. We know these things are always evolving. But yeah, man, I think the cheat code is to have a solid offensive line and a run game established, and then your quarterback can come right in and kind of take that to the next level. I think that is definitely something the Steelers should, again, just see how that all played out and think, what, maybe we should build this thing up a little bit before we go and try and make a splash and acquire our next franchise guy.
Right. And Mike Tomlin's made a big, he's made it very clear that he's wants a mobile quarterback.
Yes.
And the Rooney's, Mr. Rooney has said the same thing. This has been, this has been, this has not been a secret. The Steelers, and again, not a Lamar Jackson, but just a guy who can use his feet to extend plays, get outside the pocket, make throws on the run, but also if the defense breaks contain or they give you a gap, you can run through it and get
Which is
5,
what
10.
that's Joe Burrow that you just described.
That's exactly what Joe Burrow does. Even Matt Stafford was able to do it on occasion for the Rams.
Justin Herbert does that really well.
Yes.
They run when they need to, when the defense gives it to them.
Exactly. It's about taking what's there. And when a quarterback has that ability, it does help. But a part of that also is having the offensive lines going to create those opportunities. Because
Correct.
offensive lines, oftentimes when those open up, it's because an offensive line, the other team, they ran a stunt blitz. They brought 5 guys, and the offensive line took them up. And when you blitz, when you're a defense, you're being more aggressive there. It is a lot harder to maintain your gap integrity when you're being aggressive, trying to set the tone, and trying to make moves that are going to be aggressive to get you in the backfield. Oftentimes, that's when a gap opens up and the quarterback can run. But before that can happen, you need the offensive line to pick those things up. And I get that some people, want that quarterback now because everyone's impatient and they want it. But I mean,
Sure.
I truly think that that's, like you said, it's a cheat code for the Steelers to say, hey, you know what? We can reinvest in the defense, reinvest in the offensive line. And if quarterback works out, great. If we find our guy falls to us, that's awesome. But we want to make sure that we're in a good place for when that guy comes in, much like they were when Ben Roethlisberger was drafted to the 2004 Steelers.
Exactly. And that's the cheat code in the NFL now, like the ultimate cheat code, Chris, like the unlimited ammo and weapons in Grand Theft Auto. Like, look at the Bengals now for a perfect example. They've got 3 more years of barely having to pay Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and Wilson on defense. They can go out and spend a lot of money to load this thing up in the next couple years while a lot of their stars, and especially the quarterback, are on that rookie contract. There's a reason why the Chiefs have been to 4 straight AFC championship games, 2 Super Bowls in there, Super Bowl champions in there. It's because they could load that thing up around Patrick Mahomes because he wasn't making diddly squat.
Right.
That, I think, is where you want to be. You don't want to, listen, it could still work out for Jacksonville. I still think Trevor Lawrence can play. But to me, you're asking that guy to do a lot because there's nothing around him. If you're Zach Wilson with the Jets, right, or Sam Darnold before him, you get asked to do a lot because there's not much around you. I would rather have it the other way. Build up around the quarterback, and then you get your guy, and then you have him for 4 or 5 years, insanely cost-effective, and you can spend money on the defense. You can spend money on playmakers. You can spend money in the trenches. I just think we've seen so many examples over the past 5-6 years of that being the blueprint. Obviously, the Rams are different than that. Obviously, the way the Patriots won with Tom Brady and what the Bucs did was different than that. But I think there are a lot of examples too. The Chiefs being the most shining one of, if you get the quarterback who can play and you've got a nice foundation around him already, you can supplement that even more with the lack of money that you're paying to your quarterback. And that's when you can really have a 4, 5, 6 year window where you're truly contending every single year.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about this more with Wes because I think there's some other things about this because some people think also you have to have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. You can't find those guys. And I also think it's not necessarily that locked in. You don't need that specific kind of guy, but we'll talk about that on the other end of this break here. First, I got to tell you guys about betonline.net. Football season might be over, but basketball is full in steam. And for both pro and college hoops, you can make money on betonline.net. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to get their next head coaching job, betonline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline reigns the best spot for all sports scores, podcasts, and news all season long. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right down to Olympic competition and information. Head to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter here with Wesley Euler on a Tuesday episode of the Locked On Steelers. Wes, let's talk about let's keep talking about this because I want to also look at something here. And a lot of guys think, well, the Steelers, Chris Wentz. I mean, so what if they get that offensive line? If they don't get like Aaron Rodgers or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, they're doomed. They'll never be able to compete. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I do think that would help. It would certainly give them an edge.
Sure.
But I mean, you look at some of the teams that competed this year. The Titans were the 1 seed with Ryan Tannehill. The Niners were a field goal away from getting to their second Super Bowl in 3 years, and their quarterback is Jimmy Garoppolo. And if there's anyone that has delusions of grandeur about who Jimmy Garoppolo is, he is not anywhere close to where Burrow, to where Mahomes. He's not there. If the Steelers can get a guy who has, again, the rest of the team has to be built around him. There's no doubt about that. Like, I'm not saying that this guy just is going to walk on the team, everything's going to be great.
Sure.
But if you get a quarterback that's like just decent, doesn't turn the ball over, gives your receivers chances in one-on-one situations, and knows how to manage the game properly so that the defense and the run game can be the things that win it for you, you can compete in today's NFL and go toe-to-toe with the baddest of the bad.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you there. And now I know a lot of, I don't know what, maybe the more cynical members of Steeler Nation, they'll say, yeah, the Niners have gotten close with Jimmy G. They've been to a couple NFC championship games. They were in the Super Bowl. Nick Foles just won the Super Bowl a few years ago, not too long ago with the Eagles, but that those guys, are more of the exception than the rule.
Right.
Hey, yeah, the Rams got there with Jared Goff, but they still lost. The Niners got there with Jimmy G, but they still lost. And part of that was because those guys weren't able to make some of the, everyone points to, if Jimmy G just makes that throw to Manny Sanders, the Niners win that Super Bowl. So I realize there is some nuance there. But there is, Chris, like there's a big gap between being one of these teams that bottoms out, Jets, Giants, Lions, winning 3, 4, 5 games a season, and being a team like the Titans, like some of these other teams that don't have an A1 quarterback, but are still able to win games, still able to compete. And I know a lot of Steelers fans will be thinking, I don't want that. That's good, but not good enough. That has you in the dance, but you're kind of maybe always the bridesmaid, never the bride type thing. But folks, it's not as easy as the Steelers have made it seem the last 18 years.
It's not.
Especially for people our age, Chris. Like I know that the older audience that's listening to this, they'll remember the time between Bradshaw and Ben, and they know what I'm talking about. It's not just as easy as, hey, okay, you got to go out there and you got to find the guy that can go toe-to-toe with Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert and Josh Allen, and that's just the AFC alone. Yeah, in theory, that is easy to say, but it's much harder in reality because what if that guy doesn't exist for the next couple years? Or what if you're not going to be in position to draft that guy in the next couple years? I think we all know one thing for sure, and that is that the Steelers want to be a team that can legitimately compete every single year. And I said compete, not contend, because I don't think any of us thought the Steelers were contending at any time this year, but they were competing. They were in the hunt for the playoffs and for the division title at times. They want to compete every year. They want to get to December. They want to get now to January with the extended week of the season, 2 weeks in January, and still be playing meaningful football. And I know for a lot of the fan base, they'll say, I don't give a rip about that. I want to win Super Bowls. But realistically, you have to strike that balance because you don't want to bottom out. You don't want to have 2 or 3 or 4 losing seasons in a row.
Right.
I know some Steelers fans are probably saying, I do, and let me tank and get that quarterback. But that's just not how this team is going to operate. And if you actually went through that as a fan, I don't think you would enjoy it. Ask 76ers fans how much fun it was for losing for 5 straight years.
Boy.
Ask Pittsburgh Penguins fans who are a little bit older how much fun it was losing for being the worst team in the NHL for 4 straight years before you got Crosby and Malkin. That's a long 4 years. So I think there is a balance to strike there. And that's kind of what I expect the Steelers to try and do here because they're not going to be in a position to get a top 5 quarterback in the draft without trading up a bunch of capital, which is certainly something they could do down the road. But in the interim here, while you want to stay competitive, while you want to play meaningful football games, while you don't want to just punt on a couple years of the primes of guys like TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick, and you don't want to waste the end of a borderline Hall of Fame career that it is right now for Cam Hayward and could take that continue to the next level. That's just how the Steelers operate. You might not love it, but that feels like the blueprint for this offseason and maybe, for the next year or two.
I think you make a great point comparing the Sixers and the Penguins there as far as their efforts, because both teams tanked. They were getting first overall picks back to back. Like they were just lining them up. And in Philly, they kept saying, trust the process.
Trust the process.
And to their credit, they did assemble a really talented group. It just didn't work out. But I think that's a beautiful sign about how this can go. You can be like the Penguins, and you know what? Line up Sidney Crosby.
Maybe it works.
Marc-Andre Fleury. Maybe it works,
but it doesn't always work.
Right, it doesn't always work. It's something Bomani Jones says on his podcast, The Right Time, which is a great podcast. You should subscribe to it. He says the lottery is not a retirement plan, and people who think, oh yeah, we could just tank for a while and get some guys and it'll work out. Imagine if the Penguins, if they tanked that year and for some reason they lost the lottery and they didn't get Sidney Crosby, where would that franchise be? Would they have been able to win?
Or there's just no Sidney Crosby that comes out that year in the draft.
Or it's just that ain't your year.
Yeah, it's not your year. Yeah.
You could have a year where the Steelers tank, and then all of a sudden, the quarterbacks that we thought would be really good in that draft class aren't that good. And then you're sitting there saying,
Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield
and then you're stuck with that guy.
Josh
and
Rosen, yeah.
Exactly. And that's my point here, is that the difference is when the Steelers are competing each year, one, the guys that are there, the guys that are around that are really good, like TJ Watt, like Cam Hayward, they want to stick around. Minkah Fitzpatrick, the guy, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, they're looking around. They're not saying, man, I want to get out of here and find a team that actually wants to win. They're saying, hey, this team wants to win every single week. I want to win every single week. We won't, because it's the NFL and there's a lot of parity, but this is the place that I can grow into. And this is where eventually, when you feel it's necessary to take the shot to get your quarterback, you can do it then. But tanking to get that pick, and when I say lottery, because I know that the NFL doesn't have a lottery, but point is, you're gambling an entire season's success and maybe development for a whole bunch of players off of one first round pick that might get you the guy that could be part of the new project. When you're looking on the roster right here, it'd be different if the Steelers were bereft of talent, but they're not. TJ's a phenomenal player. I think Alex Highsmith is growing very well. Cam Hayward's, is phenomenal. Minkah Fitzpatrick is phenomenal. I think you got good role players like Cam Sutton. You got potential with Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth. And I thought Dan Moore Jr. grew this year, and Kevin Dotson. There's a core there. You have to further build it out. That core needs more core people and maybe even some star power from free agency. But if you sacrifice those players' development to get a quarterback, then you'd be reversing everything. You'd then maybe have the quarterback without the rest of the talent, and then you're still needing to rebuild, and then you're wasting that quarterback's years.
Right.
That's why, again, I'm right with you, Wes. It's not about tanking. It's about finding a way to compete, and why they should still be looking to build the entire roster rather than just the quarterback position.
100% with you. You might tank, and you might get Peyton Manning. You might tank, and you might get Ryan Leaf as well too. I think you got to control what you can control, and that is trying to put together the best roster every single year. And I think, Chris, there were people that were calling for the Steelers to tank this year. There were people that were calling for the Steelers to start tanking back in 2019 when Ben went down for the year with his elbow injury. That's it. I think what we just saw the Bengals do is, kind of like, you want to be in it and give yourself a shot. The Bengals were 10-7. The Bengals were a half game better than the Steelers. Now, let's not kid ourselves too. I think, just eyeball test, the Bengals 10-7 looked different than the Steelers.
They were a better team. Yes, absolutely.
And they also rested a lot of guys the last week of the season. But you never have that chance if you're Cincinnati to get hot and go on a run. If you go, hey, you know what? This isn't our year, so let's just one more year here. Let's hold off and try and get another high draft pick. That just doesn't work. You might end up with Peyton Manning. You might end up with Ryan Leaf. You might end up with Eli Manning, and then Ben Roethlisberger goes 10 picks later, right? The guy that you'd rather have. It's about building it up and controlling what you can control. And then when you think the time is right, when you identify your quarterback, whether it's in the draft, whether it's someone who's available like a Matt Stafford situation, that's when you say, all right, this is our guy. We'll give up a little bit to go get him because we think we've got the system around him, the support around him, that's kind of your final piece on the chessboard. But I don't think I don't think you throw down your. No, see, this is maybe not the best analogy because the queen's the best piece on the chessboard and not the king. But I don't think you throw down your queen on the chessboard and surround her with a bunch of pawns. Right? Like you need your bishop, you need your rook, you need some enforcements there.
Look at you with the chess analogy.
I'm the queen's gambit, baby. I would rather do the Patrick Mahomes thing than do the Trevor Lawrence thing. And I think the Steelers have an opportunity to do that because, like you said, the roster is not flawless. The roster needs work, but I think you've already got some nice foundation laid there. The foundation needs some repairs and needs some reinforcements, but it's started. You're certainly, I think, a few steps ahead of a lot of other teams that are kind of in the same boat as you, trying to rebuild and retool this thing.
Absolutely. I think that's the bottom line, is that you're rebuilding, but rebuilding isn't a one-faceted thing. It is something
especially in the NFL.
Especially in the NFL.
You can't get LeBron James and just all of a sudden you're really good. You know,
exactly.
It's not Kevin Durant can't just turn you around in a season or two. It takes more. It takes a lot more than that in the NFL.
And even in their situations in the NBA, LeBron didn't win his first team a ring. He helped turn it around. He helped them get better, but he had to leave and go to Miami and come back, and then they were able to win. Kevin Durant didn't win the Thunder a ring. He had to leave and go find success somewhere else. I think the same thing especially applies in football, where that with 11 guys on the field at a single time for a team, that's where a single player has maybe the least impact. When you drive outside of the quarterback, because they touch the ball every play. But but still, it takes a lot more than just one or two high draft picks to build, and the Steelers understand that, which is why they're not trying to tank anytime soon. But Wes, we got to talk about one more thing here. I want to take a more global look at where the AFC North and really the NFL is in relation to the Steelers, because the Rams are in an interesting spot now with where they at, and they have all these players that are they're now, and they're wondering what are they going to do. But the Bengals are too. Are the Bengals going to be this juggernaut that dominates the AFC North for the next decade, or was this something that we might not see? Will they struggle to get back to this Super Bowl spot? Because I think there's some interesting comparisons when you look at prior players on that. But first, we got to talk to you guys about RockAuto.com. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? For example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump can be $353 from the chain store, but only $216 when you visit RockAuto.com. Rock Auto is a family-owned business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you need: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. And if you go explore the easy-to-use website today, you'll find that solution to your auto part needs, whether you have a car or a truck. Go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car or truck. Be sure to write "Locked On" in there. How did you hear about us box, so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Euler. We're continuing our talk here, looking back at the Super Bowl and things. And one thing about the Bengals, and we heard it all playoffs long, when Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow play, everyone was saying the Steelers, they'll never catch up to that. They're so far away. And I agree. The Steelers have a lot of work to get to that point. But I also don't think that when people are putting the Bengals in that conversation, they did a great job at a playoff run this year, getting to the Super Bowl. But a lot of people are just assuming, oh, yeah, they're going to be back like next year. Joe Burrow will have like a lot more chances at this. And I'm like, do y'all pay attention in the NFL? Because how many times have people said this about a quarterback that you really like? He comes out really hot as a young player, and then it doesn't happen. For Pittsburghers, I think the one that shines the brightest is Dan Marino, being a Pitt guy, and he made it to the Super Bowl his rookie season. Everyone said, "Oh,
it's a great example."
Never came back. But Wes, you can even go to recent examples. Drew Brees was in the Super Bowl and won it in 2009. He played for an entire decade after that, and never got back. Aaron Rodgers, since beating the Steelers in the Super Bowl, has never made it back. Peyton Manning won one time with the Colts, and then when he went to the Broncos, he made it back. But the one time he won was because of the defense carrying him. It is not some guaranteed thing that if you're a great quarterback, if you have a great arm and you do well on the field, that you're just going to get all these opportunities to the Super Bowl. And I think that's something to remember when we're looking at the Bengals and the prospect of them dominating, moving forward.
Buddy, I completely agree with you. We do this all the time in every sport. Like you see it in football. Everyone was the Chiefs are going to be in the Super Bowl for the next 5 years. So they didn't even make it to the AFC Championship game this year. Your Aaron Rodgers and your Drew Brees analogies, and Dan Marino as well too, spot on. Who would have thought that Drew Brees wasn't going to go back to another one in 2009? Who would have thought that Aaron Rodgers would never get back to another one in 2010? The examples of that go on and on. I feel like I reference Philly pretty regularly around here. That's also because I worked in Philadelphia and for the Eagles flagship and for the Eagles radio network for 3 years. When that team won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, they all said, oh my goodness, we got healthy Carson Wentz coming back. Yeah. And look at this roster. Yeah. I mean, Chris, that offseason, when I went into the Eagles facility, I can't remember if it was for the combine or for something, they had all this stuff on the wall, the new standard. Get used to this. Talking about how they were going to be contending for Super Bowls, for the next decade. What happened there? It can all go away very quickly in a salary cap league, in a league like the NFL that, again, has so much turnover and so much that goes into it. Like, I don't ever like to necessarily put these things out like into existence.
Right.
But what if in week 3 next year, Jamar Chase has a season-ending injury? There's no guarantees in this. And I think especially when you look at the scope of the AFC, man, like it's easy to look at the NFC right now. Tom Brady's retired. At least we think so, right? Of course, that had to leak out on Super Bowl Sunday because Tom Brady can't let one stinking Super Bowl going without injecting his face everywhere. Tom Brady retired, we think. Aaron Rodgers getting older. Russell Wilson might be gone. Like there's maybe a Kyler Murray unhappy. Oh gosh, what if both of those guys ended up in the AFC? Like it feels like aside from the Rams, there's a real kind of power vacuum in the NFC right now. Whereas you look at the AFC, there are so many teams that are set with their quarterback for the next decade. You never know. I mean, I think everyone thought that the Chiefs-Bills game was going to be the Super Bowl. Neither one of those teams even ended up in the Super Bowl. It is such a year-to-year league. Every sport is a year-to-year league, but the NFL chief most amongst them. You can be the Niners and go from picking second in the draft to go into the Super Bowl like they did against the Chiefs in 1 year. You can be the Bengals and win 6 games the combined last 2 seasons and be in the Super Bowl. That's the beauty of the NFL. But the pain of the NFL is also that absolutely nothing's guaranteed. And that's why we've been so spoiled as Steelers fans. No losing seasons for the last 18 years. You made the playoffs more than half the time in that stretch. Like that's rare. I know what the Patriots did over the last 20 years and makes it seem easy. What the Steelers did over the last 18 years with Ben Roethlisberger, it seems easy. It's not, man. Because look at the Packers. I mean, the Packers, between Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, 2 probably top 10, top 12 quarterbacks of all time. Mm-hmm. They've been to 3 and they won 2.
Yeah.
In 30-some years, man.
Yeah, it's 2 generations of football when you think about it. And
it's so tough to win a Lombardi trophy because of the injury element, because of the one and done postseason, because of a lot of different things. So yeah, you should be encouraged if you're a Bengals fan, if you're a Bills
absolutely.
fan.
I'm not saying they shouldn't.
Right, if you're a Chiefs fan, because we got our quarterback and we got some money to play with, all these different things, but nothing's guaranteed. And your Marino example, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, I mean, those 3 guys are Hall of Famers. Those 3 guys are 3 of the best 10 or 12 to ever play the position as well, too. And they all only made it one time. You never know. It is such a year-to-year league. The Bengals, and I'm not even saying this, I'm not trying to sound like a Steelers hater here. The Bengals are probably just as likely to miss the playoffs next year as they are to be back in the AFC Championship game. Because that's just the nature of the NFL, man.
No, it really is. I mean, you look back throughout the you look back throughout the history of just how when teams lose in the Super Bowl, it's right. Also not guaranteed that they're gonna just hop right back in the mix. I mean, you look at the past the past few years, the Chiefs. Everyone thought they'd be right back in, and the Chiefs again, Patrick Mahomes. They have an established core, but they didn't get back to the Super Bowl. The Niners the year before that, they had to struggle for a year before getting back to where they were in the NFC Championship.
Even the Rams, and we know they're a different team with Jared Goff as opposed to Matt Stafford. but the Rams were in the Super Bowl, and then the next year I think they went 7-9 and didn't make the playoffs. So it's not like they fell off a cliff, but they had a losing
lost to
record.
Mason Rudolph and the Steelers that year.
That's right. It's the ultimate year-to-year league, and that's why it make when you have had what the Steelers have had, what the Patriots, some of these organizations, it's impressive. Like it is without a doubt, but also nothing is guaranteed, man. Absolutely nothing is guaranteed. One injury to a Jamar Chase, one, losing a key coordinator or staff member here can make all the difference. And that's just life in the NFL. It is such a week-to-week proposition and such a year-to-year game.
It is such a year-to-year game. But again, this is why I think the Steelers, they certainly have a lot of work to do. I am not negating that. I'm not saying that they should be favorites or anything. They have we got to see what their roster even is going to look like for next year. But I think it's a lot closer than people want to admit it. It's just simply because the NFL teams are a lot closer at all times. Even the worst NFL teams are a lot better than people give them credit for, because there's a lot of talent a lot of talent in this league. So and like you said, that parity, a team they get a couple things to go their way, all of a sudden they can go from a bottom feeder to a powerhouse in quick order. But what makes you a sustained powerhouse, what makes sure that you can compete every single year, or you can be in the conversation every year about what teams should you be watching out for. It takes that organizational integrity. It takes consistently building, not giving up on seasons, not giving up on players, and continuing to keep guys in, keep the guys in that you want, and then going and finding guys that then fit that mold and that build that you've put together as an organization. We'll see what the Steelers' plans for that are moving forward. Wes, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. You're always a joy to have on this show, my friend. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yes, sir. At Wesley Euler on Twitter. I'm always kind of posting what we're doing there. But I host the Steelers Blitz with Arthur Moats, as most of you know by now. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts, just Steelers Blitz. You can also catch us live at noon, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, on iHeart website, iHeart app, Steelers website, Steelers.com, Steelers app as well, too. And then, for you WVU Steelers crossover hooligans like me, Ears and Beers podcast. If you want my thoughts on some WVU hoops and football and all those shenanigans as well, too.
Absolutely. Him and Adam Crowley get down on the show, so y'all should definitely check it out.
Oh, we'll definitely be having Mr. Carter on sometime in late August to preview a little backyard brawl.
Oh, that'll be a lot of fun. I definitely look forward to that. So thank you very much for all those who have enjoyed the show. Remember, you can find this on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You get all of our daily content for free. And if you want to help us out even further, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts with a positive comment, and you'll get a special shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again to Wes for joining us. We'll be back in your ears and on your screens tomorrow with another episode of Locked On Steelers.